just to give you a little bit more information about these four people, in a sense, the highlights of what they do with each of their projects is this. So for Eesha, it is showing us, I would say, how to make a marginalized community a tourist draw where they are in charge of the narrative. For Arif, it's how to introduce unprecedented measures to ensure hotels and restaurants improve their waste management. We're going to hear more about that in a minute. For Beks, explaining how you promote empowerment of the community to make sure that they are the leaders of future wildlife businesses in Africa. And for Stefan, how you come in as an outsider to find a solution to the effect of climate change on the skiing sector and seasonality in Austria. All amazing challenges. Let's get to it. And before we get into your stories, drill down into your particular stories, I want to ask each of you a question. Was there a moment, an epiphany, when you first realized that you could create change, you could do something? Eesha, let me start with you.
So we started in Mumbai, in India, and Mumbai wasn't even considered a tourist destination when we started out. This is 2014. This is considered a transit destination altogether. My co-founder, who's here, and we were in creative roles in marketing. So I was working in the India chapter of the publication Time Out, and my co-founder was working as a young copywriter with Leo Burnett. And so we were very creatively driven, of course, as people. I have to say, like, he was sort of like the official guide in our friend circle. Like, he would take, like, if he were to go to a venture to a market in Mumbai or something, we would just chime along because he knew those things really well. So he discovered a morning in Mumbai which was just fabulous. Like, it had thrown me off completely with joy. I thought I had arrived onto a movie set, and I said, like, we've got to do something. And this was about, like, the communities, the migrant communities, the fishing communities, all coming together at 5 a.m. and starting work. And the first thought anybody would have, like, when they would venture out in the morning in Mumbai would be like, am I like the only one who's waking up that late? Because this is insane. This is a lot of people on ground starting their journey. And of course, India is sort of very service-oriented as an industry in tourism. We value ourselves for our very, very high service standards. So you can imagine in 2014, when experiential tourism itself was nascent, the idea of waking up a guest in a 5-star hotel, telling them to wake up at like 4:30 a.m. was wild. Like, there was like, how dare you? So I think, like, the first few tours had to be sort of like, given for free. We got amazing feedback. But when we started having our phone calls start ringing every day for paid tours, that's when we felt like we were onto something. That was, that was
okay.
Good.
We're going to drill down, as I said, and find out more about your project in a second.
Sure.
Arif, for you, was there that light bulb moment when you thought, I can change something here?
Thank you very much, Raj. I think from my side, I'm a traveler myself. Like, I like to travel. I've studied in Malaysia for 4 years, so I've gone around like Southeast Asia quite a lot. And I dive. So I think that the light bulb moment was in 2012, right? A very long time ago. And I was diving in a small island in Malaysia called Tioman. And then the plastics which I saw right underwater was just horrible. And basically from that moment, I started to dive and collect waste. Like, it was a personal thing. I wasn't in government yet. I didn't have any sort of decision-making powers then. So this was basically the moment that I wanted to bring some change. And the worst thing is that a few years later, I was in Oman, and then I was taking a walk at the beach, and then I saw 3 dead turtles. And they're wrapped in plastic as well. So I was like, I need to step up my game. So I think it was more of a personalized moment for me.
I think they always are personal moments, I think. Beks, for you, tell me your story. What was your epiphany?
Rajan, I almost feel like I've had a few, but one that particularly comes to mind is my background is a professional safari guide. So I was one of these very lucky guys that got to travel around Africa and experience and see so much and get to share the richness of our beautiful continent, Africa. And, but, you know, when people mostly come to our part of the world, they see the glamorous, beautiful sides of it, but don't really get to experience the back of house, as I call it, you know, the not so glamorous side of it. And my heart would sink when I would return and go back to certain places where I'd been tracking black rhino on foot, or having incredible experiences of tracking lion or leopard on foot, and then return back a few days or a few years later, rather, and that wildlife is gone, and some of those areas have been cleaned up to try and grow crops in the most dismal of circumstances. And there's this human-wildlife conflict that's happening, and the disappearing of those species and the rapid deterioration of the environment. And trying to sort of come up with this position and be comfortable, the fact that you're at this beautiful luxury lodge or camp, and there's somebody who's holding up a whole activity to go out on an afternoon because they're having a spa treatment, and that's a big fiasco. And you think, there's an imbalance here.
Something's wrong here.
Something's wrong here, and it's got to shift.
Yeah.
And that pushed me constantly to say, how can I do this better and have a bigger impact?
Yeah. So basically, the spa treatment of that luxury guest was more important than actually the wildlife and the nature around. That, yeah, I can see why that was an epiphany. Stefan, for you.
Yeah, I think I'm a civil engineer by education, so sustainability and thinking about the environment, different approaches, I think that's yeah, I'm dealing already and thinking pretty long time already, 20 plus years. But what the light bulb moment you said, I think it was when my younger daughter in the age of 5-ish something then asked as a birthday present or a gift for a garbage claw, and to get her then out and to collect the garbage out there. And it was really then interesting to go then out on Sundays and collect the garbage which was lying around, and to see that already that you have had already in that case of education, how you interact with the children, have already a change, and then do that together with them. I think it's a great experience. It's something where then it came really out that everybody can change something. At least it's small steps. Each step and each piece counts.
Very good, thank you. I want to open this up into a conversation where we learn about the challenges and the obstacles, and they share their experiences. But I think obviously, first of all, we should just get a little bit of background as to what each of these projects are, what they're actually up to. Eesha, I know you started in 2014, No Footprint. Mumbai by Dawn, you mentioned that was your first tour. What are the other tours that you are now doing?
So several tours. I think Mumbai by Dawn prepared us to realize that the kind of work that we wanted to do, which was focused on destination, we wanted to highlight the best stories of a destination. And so that prepared us to then start interacting with communities that inhabit it. We were very, very keen to get a lot of people engagement every time a traveler visited. So then we started focusing on communities within Mumbai. So for example, the East Indian community, the story of the Parsis in Mumbai, we followed that up with expanding to Delhi and Jaipur. We actually won an award for our work by highlighting the queer community in Mumbai. So we also got, as allies, we also wanted to sort of like talk about the underrepresented sort of like conversations within tourism and sort of like mainstream that. In Delhi, we, for example, really continued that work, and we're doing interesting work around the refugee tours as a, the refugee.
So you have refugee food tours, don't you?
That is correct. The refugee food tour, we do, there is a big gender element in Delhi. Delhi is sort of like got the reputation for not being the most gender equitable city. So we do something where women talk about like what that's like to live in Delhi. Then, for example, in Jaipur, we do something about like climate through the lens of food again. There's a community in Rajasthan that has built an entire cuisine because historically they had no access to sort of like anything beyond grains and lentils. And so there is an entire cuisine that they've built just on that, and it's delicious.
Well,
Yeah.
Brilliant. And now I think you have 50 plus experiences going on in Delhi.
Yeah, across the
and
3
Mumbai.
cities.
And I think the way that you organize these tours, when we talked before, you mentioned about stand-up comedy almost being an influence on it. Almost, you have to entertain that group. How do you go about doing that? Do you train the guides and all that?
Yes. So I think at the recruitment level, I think the filter that we're looking for is just the passion for the city, because I think everything else we can sort of train on. Again, I think when we were in Paris, this is a bit of a full circle moment for us, because years ago, when we went to Paris, we were told, and sorry to all the French people in the audience, but we were told, like, beware, like, folks from Paris may not be the friendliest to you. But it completely changed our perception because of the guides we met. They loved their city, they owned it, they were amazing, and I think we borrowed that idea for sure. I think, like, in India, there was a reputation about, like, there was a perception that tours are boring, and just guided tours are boring, and they're sort of like long monologues.
Yeah.
And we sort of like approached it with the idea of like a good holiday. We were like, let's never forget that when we're meeting a customer, that their foremost motivation to come for a tour is to have a great time. So let's have conversation in a form of a dialogue. Let's create spaces where this can be a conversation. Let's have a lot of humor. So there was a lot of writing content work that went into that.
And it's all about the power of storytelling
Yes.
as well, right?
Absolutely. I've come to realize that there's several reports the reports from McKinsey in 2024 listed customers' motivations to do tours in a destination, and sustainability ranks a little lower than we'd like today. But I think that doesn't mean that people who are destination-centric cannot make sustainability fun or community conversations fun, because people are looking for local engagement as sort of like the perfect recipe to what makes a good tour. So we don't forget the fun and the holiday in a tour, even when we're doing like very serious sort of conversations.
But what you have tapped into, which is I think we're all recognizing, is this desire for authentic experiences, which tourists now want more and more, especially the more progressive tourists. They're looking for that, and they will tend to lead the way anyway, and people will tend to follow.
Absolutely.
That. Yeah.
Absolutely. Somebody in a recent panel said that like experiences is what like people are traveling for, but for the industry they're becoming like an ancillary thing. And I sometimes feel like community-focused work is becoming the ancillary thing in the experiences, but on our experience, we realize that's actually what the customer is increasingly traveling for. Of course, they will checklist the most popular things that they want to do, but beyond that, like beyond the monuments, they want to meet locals, and they want to have a great time, they want to engage with people in a city. That's increasingly what the customer is looking for. So it should not be a supplemental thing. It's actually what the customer is asking for.
Yeah. We'll come back to that, and to some of the obstacles as well. Arif, so I know you started your particular role, this role, relatively recently, but you were working for the president. You knew about tourism beforehand, but you wanted to shake things up, right? Tell me about that. How have you gone about shaking things up in the because Zanzibar has a good, strong tourism industry anyway. So what did you want to change?
I think with this, Raj, I started to work with the president in 2022, December. I was a part of his bureau, so that he had a bureau. This was actually a team that was reporting to him directly based on the 5 priorities which he has. So he has the blue economy, he has the infrastructure, he has social services, he has tourism and technology as well. So we were more of like advisors, whereby we are more of an oversight for the ministries. So we go, we see like what's going on in the ministries, and then we go and report back to the president. But as far as we could reach was just advising that this is what is happening, and this is what we advise to happen. As of last year, the 1st of October, he called me to his office. He's like, okay, Arif, I've had enough of your advisors. It's time for you to do your own advisors. So he appointed me to the role of the executive secretary for the Commission for Tourism Zanzibar. And we've seen that the sector was actually facing a lot of challenges. To be honest, a lot of challenges in terms of regulation, safety, security, and so many other things. And he told me, like, specifically, I want you to take care of the challenges of the sector. So we had like noise pollution issues, we had safety and security, we had beach boys issue as well, like they're harassing the tourists, like we had basically so many things. We've started to take action, but then something that came to my mind is actually, I would say, the most important thing, which is sustainability and the waste as well. If you look at Zanzibar, we have like 3 main islands, which is Pemba, Unguja, and Tumbatu, and then we have another 51 small islands as well. From the north to the south of the main island, which is Unguja, is 120 kilometers. It's not that big. And the issue with waste, we have zero waste management in Zanzibar, and it's an issue that people have been just ignoring, or maybe they're shutting a blind eye to it. It's something that they pretended it's not there, like it didn't exist. So this one time I went to see the landfill, and it was horrible, to be honest. They didn't have sorting, and waste was it was about to erupt, to be very honest with you. And Zanzibar is so small, we have a population of about 2 million people. So we need to make use of every space we have. We honestly can't be drowning in dirt and waste. So for a few years right now, there's been some calls, some capacity building, some workshops on sustainability, waste management, sourcing of food, et cetera, and then, so different components of waste and sustainability as well. But there was no action being taken. It was more of a ceremonial thing.
Yep.
You sit on a panel like this, you speak about waste and sustainability, but there's no action.
And then nothing happens.
You know, and then if you take some pictures, it's like on the newspapers, on the magazines, but there's nothing happening. So I thought that there is a need, that it's time for action. It is a need that sustainability and waste management, all these practices, should not be something which is optional anymore. It needs to be something that's mandatory, because we have so many ghost towns right now that were very good destinations in the past. A lot of tourists went there, but now they're just ghost towns. And Zanzibar has nothing else.
Why are they ghost towns?
First thing is mass tourism, and then because if you look at the practices which were taking place then, weren't very sustainable. So right now they're just ghost towns. A small example is Mombasa. It's not a ghost town yet, but then if you look at the performance in terms of tourism, it has declined drastically. It's really sad, because right now we have people that are taking boats from Mombasa and they're coming in to Zanzibar because there is simply zero employment in Mombasa right now.
Wow.
Yeah.
Now, tell me about this amazing initiative that you are going to, well, by July the 1st, take me through it. What's the rule here? What's happening?
Okay, so we circulated a circular sometime in December, whereby from the 1st of July, all the hotels and the restaurants that do cater for the tourism industry need to follow the waste management practices. They must.
Otherwise?
It's mandatory. Otherwise, we revoke their licenses. So they must do it. If not, they'll be out of business. And why we've just focused on the tourism businesses is because this is the mandate which I have as ZCT, right, the Commission for Tourism. I do believe that it's not something that we can resolve as just the tourism industry, because then you have the community as well. But I do believe that we should take a lead, and in time, like, everybody else will follow.
Okay. We're going to find out some more about that as well. I mean, one other aspect about Zanzibar, I think, is that it's 80% of GDP in Zanzibar is from tourism. Yes.
This is the direct, indirect, and the induced contribution. It's about 80% of the GDP.
That's a big dependency, isn't it?
It's a huge dependency.
Yeah. You cannot kill the goose that lays the golden eggs, to use that cliche. Beks, now this is an incredible story of a guide becoming a CEO. You opened your first camp in 2006 in Zimbabwe,
yep.
And you had to persuade the government to let you do that. How unusual is it for a person like you? How unusual was it then, and how unusual is it even now for a person like you to be a CEO of a bush project?
I would say that it is still a challenge even today. I mean, the needle has shifted somewhat over the years, as we've seen. As you know, Rajan, tourism was never a business for people of color. And that in itself, that imbalance makes it very difficult to address some of the imbalances throughout Africa. In fact, that's why we still have the challenges of poaching, the loss of biodiversity, and abject poverty in some of these places, because there's almost a disconnect between valuing these places under an ownership title versus sort of participating from a distance. So in 2006 in particular, Zimbabwe, some of you might know, Mugabe was jumping up and down and not doing any of us any favors. So as passionate as I was about going back to my own home country to say I'm going to have my first safari camp outside the village that I was born in, I was very enthusiastic. I got turned down by the government 3 times, and I think they thought this guy is just going to be a pain and not go away, so let's let him lease a portion of the park, which I did. You know the saying that if you grow a beautiful garden, the birds, the bees, they'll all arrive. Well, they were not arriving in 2006. So very quickly I pivoted and took up a concession in Botswana, and the bears were in quite high demand then. And thankfully, that second camp gave me financial security and helped out that first camp. But yeah, that was 2006, and fast forward, we've just turned 18, and we just opened our 17th camp between Zimbabwe, Botswana, and Zambia. But the fact is it is still a challenge, but it's also about breaking barriers and demonstrating and inspiring future leadership, and making sure that whatever we do, we change the narrative and make sure that there is a mindset of an ownership, with starting, of course, with our staff that are all ambassadors of African bush camps, but also making sure that at the center of these communities that we serve get the total buy-in and benefits at an ownership level. So that engagement and making sure that citizen rights and whole communities that actually are the true custodians of these areas.
And you have, I think, you have the foundation, the ABC Foundation, and I think 2.5% of your turnover from ABC, African Bush Camp, goes to the foundation. What actually happens with the foundation? Is it training? What's going on there?
So there's a number of things that we do as a foundation, and incidentally, in 2006, because my whole drive at that point was to make a difference. So as I registered my first business in 2006, I also registered our foundation, because this was the inspiration. And through that, we established 3 pillars, which is community empowerment, conservation, and education. And all those 3 pillars are really what we believe will make the impact that we're looking for. I think we can all agree in this room that where we sit globally, we have a leadership challenge. And we can't be talking about current leadership challenges globally and not be investing in future leadership.
Yep.
So that's why education is one of the biggest activities in our foundation, where we've got over 1,000 children benefiting from various schemes, whether it's scholarships, internships, and things like that.
And these are future leaders, you hope?
These are future leaders.
Yeah. Fantastic. Okay, we'll come back again to you. So Stefan, very different kind of story here. Now you are almost a newcomer to tourism, in a sense, right? You had your own company, you worked with startups, you're a civil engineer by training, as you said, and you did data collection, all that kind of stuff. Then you came into working for Austria Tourism. What was your, what did you see your challenge?
So on a personal topic, I think, especially when you look at innovation, technology, transformation, it's always people that are relevant for that and that are driving, and as you guys are, you're passionate for what you're doing, and I think that's in each industry and each brand, and I think that's what people drives, and I think that's all the people that brings together, and it's in the tourism industry the same. On the other side, it's something when you sell experiences and where people want to have, they're spending their holidays there, they're working hard to go somewhere to have a great time there, and I think that's then something that you bring them a great time, a great experience, but also have a whole experience and a whole perspective on the whole topics, not only from an experience perspective and never mind the costs or never mind the efforts, but to say it in a sustainability way that it's sustainable and also not only for the specific part, but also pays back to a region, to the structure, to the country, and to the people. And I think this is something where it closes the circle then.
And let's deal with the specific issue that Austria is now dealing with, which is seasonality as a result of climate change, as a result of basically snow disappearing.
I think, yeah, that's the topic. Especially a lot of regions in Austria are pretty famous and popular for skiing and winter sports. And due to climate change, it's getting trickier. For sure, we have still great ski resorts and ski areas where it will be maybe 10 years down the road, still no problem because they're high enough to be cold enough to ski there. But in the other case, it's changing there, and also the customers are changing, and the tourists are changing based on their expectations. So it's broadly the offer, but then you have to think about the regions there and the industries there and the structures there to change as well, and that on a sustainable way. Because if you have only an industry that is more or less built on 4 months, having then the energy there put then, and then you have to broaden it up, it's also a stretch for the people there, the infrastructure, because you have not the relaxing time as well, then maybe then to recover, to restore, to rebuild, and to maintenance the things. And this is something where all the procedures, the structures have to follow new roles or new procedures or logics in one way. And I think this is something where it has to change then, and where you have to be open for that. And it's a change for everybody in that case of. And you have to believe, you have to take it into consideration as well, because there's nothing that you can do like you switch on the light.
And what you're trying to introduce, I think, is for the regions to offer a more diverse experiences, not just based on snow and skiing. Is that right?
I think that there is a lot they can already offer. I think it's only to bring that together, to make these things then maybe also in other areas and at other times also accessible, because the cable cars have to be longer open, or they have to open earlier than within spring maybe, or in autumn then, to be there also available, to have their hiking offers, biking offers, culinarity, arts, and so on and so forth, so that you have access to the different varieties. And also in the case of public transportation, that it's also a broad approach, which is maybe not there and based on the infrastructure on a global, on a yearly base or an over-seasonal base. And I think that's then where these things have to be then. I think the office is there, and I think luckily we in Austria have really the lucky situation that we have so broad variety based on the whole year, and also from different topics, from sport over culinarics, hiking, relaxing, all the different things, and we have great nature there. So it's a lot to offer, and you have to make it accessible in a sustainable way, and not, and also think about the people there, because it's always a balance of the different things and the needs.
I'm going to talk now next about the kind of obstacles that you are facing, and I think there may be some common areas here that we'll talk about. But I just first want to turn to a question that somebody in the audience has asked. How do you ensure that tourism experiences marketed as authentic do not become commodified or staged for tourists? Who wants to answer that? I don't need to get on everyone's from all of you. Eesha, I mean, your thing is for tourists.
Yeah.
But how do you make sure it stays authentic?
So we always get the community's consent. If you have, they are our partners on our tours, they are the main stakeholders, so we have to have their consent to do a tour, otherwise there is no tour without them. And to make sure that they're authentic is that you keep the community frontline and center. So, some people like to be guides on tours themselves. Some people like to share their stories through some kind of folk art, like, their singing performance, or like they do like a amazing cooking workshop. And that's when it feels more authentic and joyous, when you feel like you're entering a neighborhood and there are so many people who are happy to welcome you and share your story at a very level playing field as well, because otherwise a tourist entering a space which, where you may not have the consent, or you're not doing something like a workshop, can come across as like being a little voyeuristic. But here, they're everybody's being respectful because there's a very natural dialogue happening, say maybe like over a craft workshop, for example.
And they own it. They own
it,
the
yeah.
experience.
And I feel like it brings them a sense of pride as well for their own craft.
Yeah. Beks, do you have an issue with this, or is there ever a problem where...
I think this is a worldwide challenge, actually, where these experiences sort of lose their authenticity. But I do think that we are now in a world where there's a lot more conscious travelers and people reaching out and actually pursuing those experiences that are authentic. So I think that in itself is enough of an incentive to make sure that your experiences are ready.
What makes it authentic, would you say? Is it the ownership? Is it the fact that the local community are in charge of it to a certain extent, or they at least have a big stake in it?
I think it's a combination of things, everything from ownership to the way in which the experience is delivered. We have this expression that we talk about, for hundreds of years, particularly in Africa. People in Africa have not told their own story. Their stories have been told by others. So the more authentic stories actually is when you can interact in one of our camps with that member of staff. You're on your way back to your tent, and there's a staff member sweeping the paths and being very meticulous about making sure that you have no footprints in front of you. And you engage, and our staff are actually, really encouraged to engage, because it's that one conversation that guest has with that one person, and he has a very unique story. And it's that kind of authenticness that we talk about, where people are recognized and given the platform to talk about their narrative.
Very good. There's another question here which has come from the audience, which I think you could answer, Arif. What roles do tourists themselves play in waste management, and how can awareness be increased without minimizing the experience? How would you answer that?
That's a very good question, Raj. I would say that's the same things as they said as well. Right now you have a lot of people that are traveling to connect. It's no more of that, I want to travel just to stay in a 5-star resort and just be away from everything else. The main purpose right now is actually to connect, is to feel the culture, is to be a part of the destination as well. So before we start with the tourist, I think that we need to clean up our own house first. I do believe that if the tourists do come to Zanzibar or they go to any other destination and they find that there are rules, they will follow those rules. We're strong in culture as well, and now it's Ramadan. 95% of the population in Zanzibar are Muslims. And now is when you have a lot of tourists who are coming in, but they respect the culture. They don't eat in public. They dress up modestly. Unless, they're maybe sunbathing at the beach or that, that's fine. But if they go to the villages, if they walk in the middle of the town, in Stone Town, they dress modestly because they know that it's their culture. They know that this is their identity.
Are they doing that? Because I know you have a lot of Western European tourists, traditionally anyway. Are they following those rules?
They are following those rules. So I think it really starts with what we set as a foundation, and the tourists will come, will see, and they will follow.
Yeah. Okay, I did say that I want to ask each of you quickly, and perhaps you share this. What are the biggest obstacles that you face as you do your job day to day? Stefan, I know we've only got 5 minutes left, so I want to keep these answers quite short. But what would you say are the biggest challenges and obstacles in your way?
I think, as I said, I think we have a great offer, but to make it accessible in a sustainable way. And it also buys into that experiences. If you lose the balance in that case and it's getting unbalanced, it's not authentic anymore, and it doesn't fit anymore. And I think that's the greatest challenge, to keep on track, but not being too fast on the other way, but still be in that process and seeing what is capable, what is feasible, and what is then implementable.
Are you facing resistance in trying to make these changes?
I think it's not. I don't think that is resistance. I think it's a little bit of hesitation and uncertainty how to deal with that. And I think it's not an touristic problem, because it's a whole ecosystem and a whole structure that is interlinked, and you have to solve the different connection points there, because tourism is connected with the whole society in that case and you have to keep that connections, because if you lose them, it's getting one way or the other tricky.
Yeah.
And I think this is something where you have to look over that old systems.
Yeah. Okay. Beks, what would you say are the biggest obstacles facing you today? I mean, you've got a successful business here. 40 camps, is it? And 17 foundation? I mean, 50, sorry, yeah. What's going wrong? What are the problems?
I think these challenges can't be looked at in isolation. So again, not just a challenge for our business, but I think for the continent and other developing countries. It's said that we only emit something like 5% of the world's emissions, and yet we probably take the brunt of climate change in terms of loss of biodiversity, floods.
Coastal erosion you have there, don't you?
And the figure is out there. I think it was the United Nations figure that developing countries need something like $1 trillion to really battle out our challenges in terms of fighting climate change. And the commitment levels that are there are something like I think it's a third of that is what the world is able to commit.
Yeah.
So that shortfall is humongous if you think about the education that needs to go into place in order to transform the thinking and to really target. I mean, one of the riches that Africa has, incidentally, is the youth population. And that population, it's a massive opportunity to be able to transform people's minds, people's thinking, upskill people so that you can actually have a transformed baseline continent.
What about the human-animal conflict or the human-wildlife conflict that is an issue in many countries? I mean, I was in Sri Lanka last year. The elephant-human conflict is going, and it's the local population quite often that are, in a way, the challenge. Is that?
Unfortunately, this remains a challenge. You've got exploding populations, particularly along the east coast of Africa. And there's competition for resources and for space.
Yeah.
This is the reality. Again, I go back to the resource issue that is the biggest challenge in order to really target the youth in terms of starting businesses and getting them to be self-employed and employing others, so creating these jobs. But it's all about education, I think, and transforming people at grassroots levels to avoid this human-wildlife conflict, so that people actually begin to look at these resources as an asset rather than a nuisance.
Yeah. Arif, you mentioned, well, you're trying to institute these changes to hotels and restaurants. Is there resistance from the local community? Do they see it as more costs imposed on them?
That is correct, Raj. The issue is that the challenge that I would say Zanzibar is facing is that we have 803 hotels now. 48 of these are five-star hotels. So we don't get a lot of issues with the five-star resorts, but the 4, 3, 2, 1, etc. They want to be sustainable, but as I said before, by name and by brand.
Yeah.
But when it comes to their practices, they're not willing to do it. They think that it's something which is costly, which I do believe is true, but for a very short term. In terms of like waste management, they need to train their staff, because I had this notice out.
Yeah.
Yeah, right. I'm sure that you've seen it.
Yeah.
And basically, there are things that the hotels need to do to train their staff, to have the areas for waste deposits. But there are things that us, right, as government, will do as well. We will go and knock on every hotel. We will teach them how it's done. We've started to work with some of the development partners. We work with GIZ already. And they will go and they will consult in terms of wastewater management. And we are making the approach already, but it's just that the stakeholders are being resistant. They will come up with small excuses that the infrastructure is not ready, the logistics are not ready, this and that are not ready. But I just think that we need to take this forward, and once it's kicked off, I think like everything else will align into place.
July the 1st is a...
Yes, July the 1st is the date.
D-Day, it's an important day.
D-Day.
Eesha, for you, I think you mentioned to me before as well that perhaps inbound marketing for the inbound tourists is not necessarily working for you that well. Tell me about that.
I think it's years of, like I mentioned, I think it's years of India being a very service-oriented industry. There can be various reasons for that. It could be years and years of colonization, so for us just revering anybody who comes from the West. So I think like because of that, what happens is that when you're so service-focused, you recruit people who are also then service-focused, and I think creativity generally just becomes like a low metric in terms of success within the industry or what you're even seeking for that matter. For us also, I think the end customer has gone and then put a lot of pressure on like large DMOs and said that like, hey, this is the tour I want to do next. And that has propelled things for us. But I think, yeah, I think that's not come in the way. I myself have experienced that as a guide where one quick example is that, like, for example, I was briefing guests I met at a hotel lobby, and then I was told by my client that, like, that's not the way to do it. You should have been standing while briefing your guests. Because that's just and I don't blame them. That's for years that they've expected that. So, you know, like, if you're a client, if you're a guest traveling in India, you will say the nicest things about, you know, everybody, from the driver to the doorman. You'll be greeted with that champagne. I feel like those are the standards, and somewhere, because of that, you get so careful that you almost, like, you know, creativity comes with like a bit of a appetite for risk.
Yeah.
You don't want to go in the other direction.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you've got to change mindsets a little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah. Listen, we've only scratched the surface here. It's a real, I mean, this 4 amazing people that I've got so many questions here that I want to ask you, but guess what? We haven't got time. I'm sure you have too. If you want to catch these guys, I think they're around a little bit longer. So please feel free to go up and talk to them. But in the meantime, could you please put your hands together for Stefan, Beks, Arif, and Eesha?